You've all heard me speak a number of times over the years about cultism in negative terms. I've criticized the cult of the spiritual master, and so forth, and cultic attachments that people create with one another. In other words, I myself have used this word as a negative term to criticize a certain aspect of your own approach to spiritual life. And one of the primary aspects of the negative meaning I gave to the word cult was the exclusiveness of the cult. In other words, married people sometimes create a cult with one another. They get married and they go off together and they're never heard from again. Except in superficial TV language with people they happen to bump into for the rest of their lives. And the same with people who join groups that are cultic in nature. In other words, where there's a certain kind of hyped enthusiasm and people gather together attracted to that enthusiasm itself and accept all the dogmas with which that particular group makes themselves enthusiastic, and then they create themselves a kind of enemy of the world and lose communication with the world in general, with the processes of life. And we have seen it here throughout all the years, again and again and again. The cultic quality, the kind of gleefulness, gleeful enthusiasm for having found it, you see? And that's not it. That's got nothing whatever to do with this teaching and with the value that I can have for you personally. Nothing to do with it, and yet it somehow or other, even in the midst of this serious attempt, you see, to develop real practice in people, this quality constantly reincarnates, reappears, distorting the practice, distorting your understanding, making you into a cult of enthusiastic people. Enthusiastic for the sake of enthusiasm itself, just gleeful, you see, having found it, being protected by one another, being able to be put in a good mood by one another, being able to believe that there's something true and you're all associated with it. And by being associated with it, you see, you're glamorized by the energy of it. And people just read spiritual books and very often begin to believe they're enlightened, you see, just by reading books. And here you can not only read books, you can be with me, you can live with this community, you can practice devotional practices and so forth, you see. So you can really begin to believe you're enlightened for no reason whatsoever. So you must be very mindful of this quality of cultism, which I've criticized again and again and again over these years. So much of my work with you is to undermine this childishness in you. So many of the years of my work with people was spent trying to deal with this childishness, the failure of people to truly live the spiritual process, you see. That's the significance of the way I had to work with people for several years. To uncover all of these methods, these strategies that are simply childish. And they must be uncovered, and they must become a matter of responsibility in you before you can truly live this practice. Now, this tendency that's in you, and which is present in members of other religious groups, and which is present in everyone, in the form of every group that exists, not just religious groups, political organizations, begonia fanciers, whatever they are. Every time there's an organization of people associated with something about which you can become enthusiastic, you'll see the qualities of the cult. And I'm not kidding about begonia fanciers. If any of you have ever belonged to a sort of hobbyist organization, you'll see precisely the same kind of mentality that appears in what are now being negatively called cults. Have you watched political organizations? Have you ever watched what happens during presidential campaigns? Watch what happens in those great big auditoriums with president and vice president-elect. Or whatever they call them, nominated. That's cultic insanity. One of the primary cults in our time is the TV cult. You realize how many millions of people are watching TV at this very moment? Millions. Millions and millions and millions of people all over the world watch that insane tube every day. Some things about it are entertaining and so forth, but it becomes their entire world. It becomes the entire source of their understanding, their intelligence. It dictates their mood. It dictates what they can know about. For most people, it is nearly the only source of information apart from gossip. And there you see brainwashing. If anywhere, you'll see it in the TV game. The repetitive messages of subhuman existence. And people are fragmented by TV into single individuals, you see. They lose their intelligence, they become helpless. And they, by being secluded in their homes, fail to create community. And then they become exploited, you see, by greater powers, state powers and so forth. Now, the roots of this kind of negative cultism are present in the childish mentality of every man, every woman. It is the need to depend on parental energy, parental attention, and so forth, in order to be sustained, to feel good. The need to be loved, while at the same time not wanting to be responsible to be love. But this tendency is not only present in our childishness universally. This tendency is also dogmatically justified by specific cultural influences with which we've all come in contact. And to begin to confine this examination of cultism to the area of religion itself, consider religion, downtown religion, establishment religion. Consider the religious message that you probably became associated with when you were a child. It was probably, for most of you, it was some sort of Christian organization that trained you, and others perhaps you were brought up in the Jewish tradition. Probably most of you didn't come from anything but a Jewish or Christian background. And what kind of mentality or approach to life was communicated to you in those cults? And they are cults, you see. Cults are not just little groups of 100 or 1,000 people in California. Cults are all religions. All religions are cults. Some positive in their quality and some negative. But what were you taught? How were you instructed to live? What you were fundamentally indoctrinated to be was a child, a believer in the parent God. And you were taught to be in awe of certain individuals who are great prophets or great saints or great saviors, to the point of ascribing to those individuals exclusive power, exclusive intimacy with the divine. The extreme example of that is in Christianity itself, in which Jesus is exclusively regarded to be God and is worshipped as such. In other words, the worship of Jesus and other cultic figures is dangerous when it becomes exclusive. Just as cultism in general tends to exclude certain things in order to confine attention to certain other things and be enthusiastic about them. You see, we see it in the principle, the very center of the cult itself, in the principle of worship or admiration. In other words, we are taught to assign the truth and the realization of truth exclusively to certain individuals, usually to one individual. And this is one of the primary signs of a cult, in that the message is exoteric, outer. It's the message for children who merely believe. They are taught to be children, just believers. And the center of the cult, the worshipped figure, image, idea, whatever, is considered to possess a certain status that no one else can attain. We assign this status to our notion of the deity. We regard the deity to be unattainable, unrealizable, totally external to us, you see. And we regard human individuals whom we deify to represent an unattainable status. This is typical of exoteric teachings, exoteric cults. People are made to be in awe of or to worship someone or some concept that is divine, with the feeling that they themselves can never attain that status, but that if they worship that reality, they will get benefits for doing so. In other words, if we enter into the childish relationship to God or to Jesus and believe and do whatever few mechanical things you're supposed to do if you belong to that cult, then you will go to heaven, or when Jesus comes again, you will be part of his organization. And he will just wipe the hell out of everybody else. And so forth, all those goodies that you get for being good. Be good, and don't try to become divine, and you will get blessings. The exoteric or outer teaching is directed to children, and it obliges people to remain children. And the results of such a message are the inevitable creation of a cult in negative terms. In other words, such a religious message must produce a childish cult, because nothing but the mood and practice of a child becomes a matter of instruction in such a cult. The cult is exclusive in nature. We have the only truth and the only one. Everybody else is wrong. Everybody else is even to be destroyed. That is the mood of Middle Eastern religions, quite often. Everyone else is the infidel. And everybody becomes an infidel relative to your cultic belief simply because they do not have in mind a few simple-minded, childish ideas which you believe in. It's not that they become the infidel because you represent a superior moral force, a superior and transcendental realization of God, that you radiate with the love of the divine. It's not that makes you superior. It's the fact that you believe a bunch of nonsense that nobody else believes. And believe me that, don't believe me. That's all it is nonsense, you see. Consider it for yourself. Consider the childish message of your own religion, you see. And you will see that it is nonsense.